The spiritual practitioner has a choice. The enlightenment practitioner has a choice. Either to be at the centre or to be off-centre. When resting at the centre, this has been described as the tree of equanimity, or the tree of meditation. Vasishta continued. The tree of meditation casts a cool shade in which all desires and cravings come to an end, and all the burning distress ceases. Meditation expands the shade of self-control, which promotes steadiness of the mind. When you're at the centre, then you're no longer caught up with the mind, and you're no longer caught up with all the notions that the mind generates and believes in. A deer known as the mind, this could be understood as the attention. I'm going to get another metaphor here now. The deer. A deer known as the mind, which had been wandering in the wilderness of countless concepts, notions and prejudices, and which somehow finds the right path, takes shelter under this tree. Which somehow finds the right path. There's no method, there's no technique. You stumble upon it. And once you find it, you need to realize what you found and make the intention that this is something worthwhile and something worth cultivating. The deer, this is the mind or the attention, is pursued by its many enemies who covet its hide or covering. It hides itself in thorny bushes known as the body in an attempt to save itself. So the attention, there are always attempts to hijack the attention. And even if there aren't attempts, we get so used to the attention being hijacked that we actually feel uncomfortable when we haven't got something for the attention to hide in. It's a bit like the kidnapped victim who starts sympathizing with their kidnappers. It hides itself in thorny bushes known as the body in an attempt to save itself. This is an example of the kind of prejudices that are meant. The deer known as the mind, which has been wandering in the wilderness of countless concepts, notions and prejudices. Another word for prejudice is belief. We hide in the belief that this is a physical reality. All this effort wears out its energies, running hither and thither in the forest of samsara, harassed by the winds known as vasana or latent tendencies, and scorched by the heat of ego sense. The deer is afflicted by interminable distress. And this is what happens when you're off-centre. You're caught up in the whirlwind of notions, of beliefs, of prejudices. And some of these beliefs are intensely subtle. I'd like to spend a little bit of time exploring this. I have in the past, but I want to drive it home a bit further. There seems to be a way of dividing people into two groups which is fashionable. Those that are considered religious and those which are non-religious. The religious people are the ones which might identify themselves with belonging to a particular faith or creed. And there are the non-religious ones which often like to think of themselves as being scientific or rational. Now it's very easy, if you're scientific or rational, to dismiss those of religious faith. And I'm quite happy to go along with that actually. Faith and belief has got no basis whatsoever except a prejudice, an inclination, a cultural conditioning to believe in something. But I don't want to go into that right now. I want to look at those who think that they're free of belief, those who think of themselves as scientific and rational, who think they've got a pretty good idea of what's real and what's not real. Such people are actually pretty much mired in belief as well. They just don't want to acknowledge it. They're mired in a particular brand of scientific belief. I say a particular brand of scientific belief because if you examine it, science isn't what they think it is. And the usual belief that a lot of people still like to cling to is an outmoded Newtonian belief that the universe is somehow hard and solid and that's the end of it. But if you start looking into it, the universe is not hard and solid. And even a hardcore materialist like Richard Dawkins would say that it's all about information technology. And the Blind Watchmaker, he talks about us simply being an information processing machine at heart. It all gets down to digital manipulation. The DNA is a digital code. So it's all about some kind of abstract number processing. It's not about little hard atoms moving around in a materialistic sort of way, banging into each other. You don't have to take my word for it. I've got here Roger Penrose's book, The Road to Reality. The Road to Reality, a complete guide to the physical universe. What more could you ask for? I'm not sure how far I'm going to get with it. I've only managed to get up to the first 100 or so pages. So if you want to know what physical reality is like, just check this out. It's basically mathematical. And what's physical about mathematical? I've got up to the chapter about complex numbers. And complex numbers are indispensable for understanding physical reality. Complex numbers are based on imaginary numbers. The imaginary number I. I is the square root of -1. In other words, I times I gives us -1. How can this be? What can be more abstract than the square root of -1? I. And you can raise I to various powers. I squared, I to the power of 2 is -1. You can even take I to the power of I. In other words, you can multiply I by itself I times, which isn't the same as multiplying I by itself once, which gives us I squared. You multiply I by itself I times. And the answer is, it works out at about 0.2, believe it or not. So this is the mathematics beyond many physical phenomena. Electricity, for example, based on imaginary numbers. But then again, aren't all numbers imaginary, in a sense? What's physical about a number? Yeah, this is what Richard Dawkins says. He's the hardcore rationalist. This is what Roger Penrose says. He's presenting us with the road to reality as something mathematical. And if you want to look into technology, if you want to look into how technology works, you have to learn about mathematics. If you want to understand about computing and you study computing science, you're going to be impressed by how abstract it is. So reality is not physical. Reality is abstract. And yet we've got this prejudice, especially amongst those that consider themselves scientific, that reality is somehow material and straightforward, it's physical. So if you are one of these people that consider yourself scientific and rational, then have a look into it. Have a look into it. Have a look into what beliefs and what prejudices that you're actually subscribing to, because your belief is just as intense and just as fundamental as any religious person, if not more so.